Okay, so picture this. It's the 9th century, right? But instead of like just a little church on a hill, imagine this bustling community, a real miniature city. And we actually have this incredible document that's going to be our guide today. It's called the St. Galler Cloister Plan.
And what's really amazing about this plan, which was created around 820, is that it's not just some theory. It was actually used to build the St. Gallen Monastery. And it was so well designed that it actually became this super influential model for other Benedictine monasteries all across Europe.
Wow, so like a blueprint.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And not just for any monastery, specifically for the Benedictines, which were, a major monastic order back then. There's even evidence it influenced places like Muncie.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. But this St. Galler plan, the scale of it just kind of blows my mind. It's huge, over 3.5 hectares.
It is a massive undertaking, that's for sure.
Yeah, but what I found really fascinating, beyond just the sheer size, is how much the layout tells us about the people who live there. Like, the placement of every building, it's like a snapshot of their lives and their social structure.
It really makes you think about how this design reflected their world, Like, okay, look at the western entrance. There was a separate guest house just for the emperor and his, entourage.
Yeah.
Totally separate from everything else.
Oh, so they were really making a statement about hierarchy right from the start.
Exactly. It shows you right away how important social standing was back then.
And right next to this, like, VIP area, they had the stables. And not just for horses, but for everything. Cows, goats, oxen.
Well, they needed all those animals to sustain themselves.
Yeah, and then right there you have the living quarters for the shepherds and servants. It's like they planned for everyone and everything.
They were meticulous. And that meticulousness, it really comes through in the way they placed the essential buildings, too. Like the kitchen, the bakery, the brewery. Those were all super close to the church, like within 40 meters.
Oh, wow. That's really close.
Well, it was a practical matter. They needed to feed a lot of people, and they needed to do it efficiently. But here's something else. Even within those essential buildings, there were divisions, like separate areas for pilgrims and the poor.
Oh, interesting. So even in like the basic necessities, they were reflecting that social hierarchy.
Exactly. They had like nicer provisions for high-ranking guests and, simpler fare for everyone else. And further in, they had the pilgrim house for longer stays and even an outer school for kids who weren't going to be monks.
Okay, so they weren't completely closed off to the outside world.
Not at all, but they were very organized about how they integrated with it. Now, if we move over to the northeastern part of the plan, you'll see they were really focused on health and well-being, too.
Mm-hmm.
There was this whole hospital complex.
A whole complex. What was in there?
Well, they had a house for bloodletting and cleansing, which was a big medical thing back then, plus a kitchen, a bath, and an herb garden.
A herb garden. So they were growing their own medicine?
Yeah, exactly. And the historical records sometimes even tell us what specific herbs they were growing, so we know a bit about their, medical knowledge.
Yeah.
And right next to the hospital was the novitiate, which is where new monks trained.
Ah, like a monastic school?
Sort of. It was designed to be a really supportive environment for, guys entering the monastic life. It even had its own kitchen, bath, chapel, even an infirmary, and a guest room for visiting monks.
Wow, they really thought of everything.
Well, self-sufficiency was huge for them. It's a theme you see throughout the whole plan. Even cemetery had fruit trees surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
Practical and, a bit symbolic too.
Yeah.
And then there was the main monastery garden with 18 carefully planned vegetable beds.
I bet that garden kept them busy.
It definitely contributed to their food supply. And it wasn't just plants either. They had enclosures for geese and chickens. And of course, the gardeners and animal keepers live right next door to all of that.
Smart. Keep everything organized and close together. Now, what about the south part? What was happening down there?
That was the domain of the craftsmen and laborers. You'd find coopers making barrels, turners shaping wood, brewers. It was like the heart of their economic activity.
So they weren't just praying all day.
No, they were making things. They were producing, they had a mill, a drying facility, a big granary with a threshing floor. They were serious about being self-sufficient.
I'm starting to understand why this plan was so influential.
And we haven't even gotten to the most important part yet, the central hub. That's where you find the church, the abbot's residence, the cloister. It was the heart and soul of the monastery.
I bet that area was amazing.
It was really well thought out. They had the wine cellar, the refectory where everyone ate together, storage rooms, even a covered passage connecting the kitchen and brewery.
So no one had to get rained on while transporting, the beer.
Exactly. And they even positioned the refectory so that the kitchen smells wouldn't reach the church. It shows how much attention they paid to the senses.
That's so interesting.
And then there were the monks' living quarters themselves. The dormitory was right above the warming room, so they could stay warm in the winter.
Smart thinking.
And get this, there was a direct passage from the dormitory right into the church.
Wow, so they could go straight from bed to prayer.
Exactly. It shows you how central religion was to their lives. Now, the abbot's residence was a bit different.
Yeah, I bet he had the nicest room in the house.
It was definitely more comfortable. It had an entrance hall, a fountain, a fireplace, multiple bedrooms, even a private latrine. It wasn't exactly roughing it.
Well, he was the head honcho. Now, what about the other buildings around the church?
Well, they had the schoolmaster's lodging, the porter's room controlling access, guest rooms for visiting monks, and importantly, the scriptorium where they copied texts, and the library right above it.
So they were preserving knowledge as well as producing goods.
Absolutely. They were a real hub of activity. And remember, this wasn't just some fantasy on paper. Archaeological evidence shows that they actually built a lot of this stuff.
So it really came to life.
Yeah. And it wasn't unique to St. Gallen either. Other monasteries from that period, like St. Wandrille, Corbie, and Gallone, had similar setups.
So it was a trend. But here's what I find even more fascinating. They didn't exist in a vacuum, right? These monasteries attracted craftsmen, merchants, servants.
They became these centers of economic activity. People were drawn to them for opportunities.
It's almost like mini cities springing up around them.
Exactly. And we even have specific examples, like St. Riquier in 831, which reportedly had around 2,500 houses, organized by occupation. You had weavers, smiths, coopers, even soldiers.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, and the monasteries were often involved in that economic activity too. They would run taverns, markets. It was a source of income for them.
So they were really integrated into the surrounding community.
Very much so. They were religious centers, but they were also economic and social hubs. And the abbot, well, he was more than just a religious leader. He's like a mayor, a protector, a patron. He had a lot of influence.
It's amazing how these monasteries evolved. Some of them even merged with surrounding settlements to form bigger towns and cities, like Ghent and Saint-Omer.
It's true. And they didn't always stay peaceful either. As they grew wealthier and more important, they had to think about defense. So they built walls, fortifications.
So they really started to look like medieval cities.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one question that often comes up is, how many people actually lived in these monasteries? The historical records can be a bit vague.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty wild numbers.
Some sources suggest hundreds of monks, even as many as 900 in a place like Jumièges. But more realistic records, like a list from 826, point to a smaller number, maybe around 114.
Still, that's a lot of people living together.
And regardless of the exact number, the overall picture is clear. These monasteries were incredible. They were spiritual centers, supply hubs, hospitals, schools. They were really the seeds of urban life.
It's like everything we think of as a city. It was all there in the monastery, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah, and it's all laid out for us in this incredible plan, the St. Galler Cluster Plan. It shows us how they organized themselves, how they lived their lives, how they ran their economy. It's a window into a whole world.
So what do you think? If we could go back in time and experience life in one of these monasteries, what would be the most surprising thing we'd encounter?
That's a good question. What aspects of their daily lives, their social structures, do you think would really blow our minds? And do you see any parallels to these self-sufficient communities in our own time, like intentional communities or even those big tech campuses? Think about how much these miniature cities influence the development of modern urban life. It's quite a legacy.
That's something I'll definitely be thinking about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the St. Galler Cluster Plan. It's been a fascinating journey.
My pleasure. It's always great to explore these historical treasures.